record. Great. And if you could just keep yourself muted while the presentation is going on, so there's no background noise. And if you have questions you can put them in the chat, and we'll try and answer them. But we'll also hold them to the end for the questions section and discussions. And then after the event, I'll be sending out a follow-up email with resources and this presentation, so that way you can reference it, and this will be going on YouTube. So this event is part of the Adapt Your Home campaign that we're running right now, which is about taking residential climate action. And this is because most of Ashland's greenhouse gas emissions come from the residential sector. Sorry, I'm also controlling my screen here. Here we go. So this event is specifically about energy upgrades at home. And this is because, as you can see here on this chart on the right-hand side, most of our emissions at home come from our heating and cooling. So together with these two blue ones, it's about 53%. So if we can work to electrify and use more efficient appliances and things like that, we can lower our emissions. And if we can even combine that with renewable energy, that's even better. So I'm gonna pass it over to Dan to get started with all of our programs and share more about what he does.
Okay, thank you. Like I say, I'm Dan Cunningham. I do the residential energy audits for the city of Ashland. And I thought what I would do is kind of describe what I go out and do on an energy audit. Typically how that starts is either people are going to give me a call and ask to have an energy audit, or even from a high bill complaint. Typically then when I go out to the home, I'm looking at the attic insulation, the wall insulation, the floor, the type of windows, the location of the windows, the type of heating system that they have, and the size of it. And then we spend a lot of time typically talking how the customer uses that energy and what they can do to make it more efficient. And then we will go into later here on the slides of the incentives that we will have to help offer that to the customers to make that happen. One of the other things that I'm doing as part of that is I will pull up your utility billing history, your energy usage. So that way we can go from many years back. That way we can help review that, kind of makes things a little bit more clear. You can go to the next slide if you'd like. So the first that you see is weatherization. The point that we want to make as much as anything with this one is the city of Ashland is the electric utility. So most of our current weatherization incentives, you do have to heat with electricity from the city of Ashland. That could be either with like baseboard, some type of zonal heat, a heat pump, that then qualifies you at least for the incentives for windows or attic insulation and even heat pump upgrades and that. We do have some other incentives for if you are going to convert your heating system from a different fuel source to electric. Once you then become an electric, then all of the weatherization incentives come available to you, and we'll kind of break those down a little bit. One that you do see in there is probably the most popular one is windows. A lot of windows get replaced in the city for a couple of reasons. Some of them, most of it is for energy savings, but a lot of them is the seal has broke, something like that. And with insulation, usually the one that you add most is the attic insulation. And the point that I want to make with that one as much as anything is if there is, so I should have mentioned that I will crawl up into the attic and take a look so we can see what you do have. And then you'll typically then would get bids, and we would offer incentives per square foot of insulation added. Almost all contractors, the insulation contractors, will not include air sealing as part of their insulation bid. It's not a requirement, but we strongly encourage that. It's something that's overlooked all the time. And unfortunately, what we want to do is stop the air from leaking and then insulate it. And most of the time, they're just insulating it and not worried about the air. But that's something we need to focus on. And so next slide. There were some questions, I guess, as much as anything about how a heat pump works. And I thought I'd go a little bit into detail of how a heat pump works. So with the heat pump, you actually have multiple components. You have the outdoor unit. You have the indoor air handler, which is typically up in the attic or in the garage. You then have refrigerant lines that run from those two, from the outside to the inside. And then some of them have, in that air handler, they have ducting potentially. And how a heat pump actually works is it takes through with the refrigerant phase change, it takes outside air in a sense, transfers that heat from the air, moves it to the inside and heats it that way. And then in cooling, most heat pumps just have a reversing valve that take that heat from inside the house, move it to the outside through refrigerant change and cool the house. And that, like I say, typically when you have it, it's either a gas, which is known as a vapor, or a liquid. And when you do a phase change, it either releases heat or adds heat. Next slide. So this first one here is our incentives for air source heat pumps. You'll see in there, I won't read the bullet points to you there, $500 for and the 9.0 greater or greater HSPF. So heat pumps are rated in the heating side and the cooling side. The heating side is the HSPF, and that stands for heating season performance factor. And then there is the SEER, which is the cooling. Here in Ashland, in our climate zone, we are in heating mode more often than cooling. So we focus on the heating side. And that's why the 9.0 or greater. The 9.0, think of that as like the efficiency miles per gallon. So the higher that number, the more efficient it is. With the heat pump, there's some extremely important things to do. Is you need to worry about the sizing of the unit. Think of how many BTUs that the unit can produce, the size of the motor, you may think. And heat pumps, they always talk in tons. Which gets confusing to customers because nobody else uses tons. Tons is 12,000 BTUs. So that's part of my audit is I'm doing a heat loss calculation and sizing the unit properly for the home. If you are some of the things to look for in a new unit. So there, let me back up. I'm sorry. You'll also see that it says performance tested comfort systems. That is a third party that does so if the unit goes through our specifications and goes after our incentive, that information gets downloaded into a third party. And what we've found that a third party, when somebody is checking on it, typically they are setting it more correctly. And like I was saying with the heat pump, it's really about refrigerant and airflow. And there's some special calculations that need to be set in with that. And so that way they can check on that. Other things when you're looking for a heat pump is they're going to talk variable speed. And sometimes there'll be variable speed compressor, which is the outdoor unit. And there will be a variable speed indoor air fan. The variable speed, what that means is the unit can ramp up or down based on its refrigerant, based on the load of the home. So if it only needs, like 12,000 BTUs, it will only produce 12,000 BTUs. But if it needs 36, it will ramp up to 36,000. It is just a way of saving energy. In the older units, it used to be known as a one-stage unit. So it would come on, produce its full power, and then shut off. And then they come into two-stage where it got closer to the set temperature of the thermostat. It would then drop down on lower BTU. But what they found is the variable speed is the most efficient. It can ramp itself up and down, very similar to what we're going to talk about with the ductless heat pump when it gets to that point. Common complaint if you have a heat pump. One of the most common complaints that people have is that the ducting blows cool, I should say. And that is true. So heat pumps operate completely different than any other type of system. where it's typically the output temperature coming out of the register is usually going to be between 90 and 100 degrees. And when that's blowing with air, that feels cool to us, but that's actually, it's doing what it's supposed to do. So another thing you should do is make sure is, again, from an energy efficiency standpoint, is on the thermostat, you make sure that it's set to auto and not on. On will mean that it's going to run continuously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's great at circulating air. Unfortunately, it's not good from an energy standpoint. So set it to auto and it will only come on when the unit is heating or cooling. And last but not least, when you are with a heat pump in the heat mode, make sure that the unit is in just heat, because all heat pumps will have some type of auxiliary heater. Make sure it's just in heat and not auxiliary or emergency heat, as that it means that it's running on the strip heat and it's going to be very expensive. So make sure that it's on heat. That's probably the most common high bill complaint is 2 months into it. I asked them, where's the heat or the thermostat set to? And they said, well, it was just in auxiliary heat or whatever. That's the wrong setting. We want it in just heat. And another way of controlling your energy bill, I should say, is with the heat pump, never move the thermostat more than 3 degrees at a time. I'm just talking in heat mode. So if you have a call temperature of 65 or 68 in the home and it's 65, that's fine, that 3 degrees. But if you want it to go to 69 degrees, at 3 degrees, most heat pumps almost always bring on their auxiliary heater. And that auxiliary heater is almost always going to be electric resistance heat, the most expensive way to heat. So you can, next slide. Forced air duct sealing. So you can see, we do offer incentives to have the ducting sealed. Again, the heating does have to be electric, whether it's obviously it'll be a heat pump or a electric forced air. And you see there that 20 to 30% of all the air that moves through that system is lost through ducting loss. That's the other one that is one of the biggest energy waste. And typically the ducting is either in the attic or in the crawl space. And one of the things that here in Ashland that we do have is there's rodents. And so the rodents love to get into the insulation and they tear a hole in that ducting and it's leaking in forever. And unfortunately, then when the unit's on, it will also potentially, depend upon where the air leak is at, but will actually pull in the air from that source, whether it's under the floor or in the attic. So making sure the ducting is sealed, or if we're going to move forward here, hopefully to move to a ductless heat pump where you no longer have ducting whatsoever. How you can tell, some quick checks of if your ducting leaks. First of all ducting will leak, even brand new stuff, but at a smaller. But kind of an easy check is if you go to the register, most registers are on the floor. It makes it easy in this case. If you lift up the grate on the register, you'll see the ring around where the boot meets the subfloor. That should be completely sealed around there. And the other thing is then when you lift that, and if the unit is not on, you should not have any smell of like the attic or the floor or any type of rodent or something. There should be no smell. It should smell just like the rest of the house. So next slide.
Dan, we have a question in the chat.
Sure.
How is insulation checked in sealed walls and ceilings?
Okay. For the attic insulation, there's a couple different ways that I do it. One is we do have a thermal imaging camera, but almost all of them I crawl up into the attic and actually measure the insulation. And then what we like to see people do is blow the insulation to an existing R value of R40, or excuse me, to an R49 or an R60 even. And then with the wall insulation, like I say, what I can do is I use a thermal imaging camera. That's probably the easiest. But as a homeowner, you can do little checks too of just even around the outlet, open that plate up and seeing if there's insulation around there. Oh, so a ductless mini split. So a ductless is just basically as it sounds. It's still the same outdoor or you still have an outdoor unit. You have an indoor unit, which in this case is called the indoor unit. And then you have refrigerant lines that run to the unit. So the only difference that you have between that and the existing forced air that we talked about is that the ducting, hence the word ductless, and that also all mini splits, ductless heat pumps do not have any type of auxiliary heater. They do, again, by reducing the compressor speed and the compressor refrigerant, they can get the units to perform completely down to 0 degrees or 5 degrees and provide its full performance of the unit. Yeah, thank you. So I kind of wrote these down in just some different orders, so don't hesitate to ask me questions with that. Where you can see the incentives for that. One that comes up as much as anything is like I say, our goal with the electric side of the money is to get rid of the old electric resistance, like the baseboard, zonal heat, something like that, and move to a ductless heat pump. Those are great replacements, and it's an easy one to save in the neighborhood of 30% on your electric bill, and having much more efficient heating. And then along with that, you get efficient cooling. And then you can see down on the bottom is we also do have a $500 incentive for a unit replacing it from, whether it's from gas, wood, or something like that, or even an existing forced air heat pump moving to a ductless heat pump there. So maybe one of the questions would be is when I would put in a ductless heat pump, like say a ductless heat pump would be a great replacement for some type of zonal heater that you already have, or that you kind of outgrown the house or something, and you have a forced air system, you no longer need to really heat and cool those other rooms. That's where a ductless heat pump comes in, much more efficient. Like I say, one, you get rid of the ducting completely, and you only have to heat or cool that room that you're going to be in at that time. Another one that it's great for is when you have a multi-level home. That's not uncommon with even a multi-level home that with ducting, that you have the upstairs unit is bedrooms or wherever it's at is going to be much warmer. That's a great place to have the ductless heat pump. So you could, even though you're getting heating and cooling with the unit, you could run cooling mainly for that unit. And that way, again, you wouldn't have to turn the temperature down of the main house quite so cool, and only heat the, like say, heat or cool the rooms that you're in. Not bad, but a side of the ductless heat pump is they're really designed for an open air or open floor plan. So if you have a lot of rooms or your house is really cut up, you will probably have to take the ductless and add multiple indoor heads to make it effective. It's a matter of airflow, or it's leaving doors open, things like that. We do recommend, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say we have a question.
Sure.
If the output from the ductless heater, is it warmer than from a central heat pump?
Yes, typically so. So with the ductless heat pump, the output temperature is not uncommon to have that up in the neighborhood of 110 to even 120 degrees, much more noticeable heat. So yes. One thing with the ductless heat pump, that if you're again coming from if you're coming from a forced air to a ductless heat pump, remember that the ductless heat pumps do not have really an air filtration system. There is a filter that's on the unit up in the top left, you see that unit there, that top will fold down, and it's a washable filter. And that filter really isn't for our lungs as much as it's for the unit protection. So if you do have some type of chronic lung issue or something, you probably have to have some other type of air cleaner associated with it in that room, but it's not part of that. I just want that part to be clear. There's nothing to stop you though, if you did have a forced air and you've already put that money into a filtration system, of using that air to help circulate it, but you want to use that as little as possible, I guess. Next slide. Heat pump water heaters. So a lot of people, heat pump water heaters have been out on the market for a while. We have kind of really been pushing them about the last 3 or 4 years. Most people have no idea what type of even water heating system they have, whether it's a gas or electric. An easy one is, if it is a gas, it has a flue come out of the top of it. And if it's an electric, there's nothing but an electric line running to it and 2 water lines. The advantage of electric storage water heaters like that, or even gas, is that you don't hear them. They make absolutely no noise. But if you're looking to save a big amount of money on your electric bill, moving to a heat pump water heater is the most efficient thing that you can do. Typically, a heat pump water heater, or I should say, an electric resistance water heater usually uses in the neighborhood of 4,500 to 4,800 kilowatt hours per year, based on the family, where a heat pump water heater will use in the neighborhood of 1,100 to 1,500 kilowatt hours. Huge substantial savings for doing that. And you can see that the typical payback, 2 to 3 years. Downfall with them is, there's a couple things we have to look at. Is their upfront cost is a little bit more expensive, where if you were out to buy an existing electric resistance water heater, you're probably in the neighborhood of $500 or $600, where a heat pump water heater is in the neighborhood of $800 to $1,300. But typically, like I say, the payback is quite quick. Now, what they do is, it's an electric storage water heater that has a compressor that's added to the top of it there. You can see kind of there in the picture. Some of them are vented, have ducting that runs to the outside, and some of them don't. Most of them that I'm seeing are not. The best places to put a heat pump water heater is either in the garage or the basement. And what it does is that unit then takes the heat from that surrounding area, converts it into electric resistance, and heats the water, transfers the water or the heat from that to that point. So when it is on, when the unit is on, it will have some noise to it. They compare it to about a refrigerator, but they have the same, typically they have the same first hour recovery rates. So just a fantastic way of saving energy. And our incentive is coming from whether you're now electric and or gas, existing.
You soundproof the closet for a heat pump water heater to help with the noise?
Yes, you can. It really depends upon where the unit is located. So if it's in the garage, you're not going to hear it unless your bedroom is really right next to it. I doubt that if you even hear it, because that wall will be insulated. But if it is inside the house, then you can do anything like that of soundproofing. You just want to make sure the unit needs to have air from that compressor on the top of it. So it's going to be taking that heat from inside that house and transferring it. Yeah, sorry. So, but yes, you can do it from the sleep quarter. Sorry. And last of our incentives that we have is for washer and dryers. And like I say, what we're looking for is an Energy Star model there, and we've combined your energy savings and your water savings, and it's a simple application that'll be on our website. So will be an application for the heat pump water heater. It's a simple rebate application, so very straightforward. I think that's all I have. Oh, I don't, sorry. Can I go back to heat pump water heaters? Yeah, apologize for that. So when you are looking at that heat pump water heater, it is a little different. So typically the units are going to be at least 11 to 14 inches taller than your existing water heater. So those are the considerations that you need to be thinking about when you're going to replace that. If it's out in the garage or under the basement, that's probably not an issue. But if it's in a closet inside somewhere and that you have it vented, you may not have the height. So there's hundreds of different models out there. So you just want to make sure that that model that you're getting, you're checking the height of it first. But they're fairly close, but it just is something you want to think about. You'll also see that the water hooks up different. On an existing water heater, almost always the water comes in from the top. And you'll see on this one here, the water almost always comes in from the side because the compressor is sitting on the top. So most of the time that takes a plumber. If you're handy, you can do it, but most of the time that takes a plumber that's going to have to change the water inlets there for you. And the last thing with that is all heat pump water heaters will have to have a condensate drain, and that's different than what your normal unit has. It doesn't have a condensate drain, so you'll need to have that. It can either go into like the washing machine drain, or it can go to the outside. So just different considerations you need to think about before it actually fails and you move forward with one. And that one's it.
Okay, I'm going to speak about one more incentive, which is an induction cooktop and range. We're still in the process of launching this, so it's not quite live yet, but it will be soon. And basically, it's available for residential and commercial applications, as long as you're an Ashland utility customer, and it has to be for a permanent installation. So the portable units are not eligible. So you could get a cooktop, which is just the portion that is on your countertop with the standalone burners, or you could get a range, which is the combination of the part on your counter and then your oven. And everything has to be completely induction, and then the oven would be electric. So in terms of how induction works, it works by heating the pots and pans directly through an electromagnetic field. So the field strikes the iron molecules in your cookware, producing heat. And the heat is only transferred between that, between the coil and your pan. So it makes cooking with it a lot more efficient and quicker, and more precise. There also isn't an open flame, and you can reduce your indoor air pollution by not using, because there's no combustion. So in order for this to work, you need induction compatible cookware, and you can test out your cookware at home by just placing a magnet underneath and seeing if it sticks. And if so, then it should work. But a lot of cookware you can buy, it'll say like induction compatible, so you know that that'll work. Another exciting thing is that there are going to be 3 portable induction units in the Jackson County Library of Things, which is really exciting. So if you have a library card, you can check out one of the portable units. So if you want to try out induction before you commit to doing a permanent installation for this incentive, you can do that, and that'll be coming this summer. And for those of you who don't know what the Jackson County Library of Things is, it's basically, it's the same as the library, but you're checking out things. So they have like camping gear, board games, stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. And yeah, so the portable models are just portable, so they're not as much power as the permanent installation ones, but they still work really well. I was able to try one out, and it cooked like my pasta super fast. So it was really cool to try it out. And it was, yeah, it was pretty cool. So stay tuned for more details on this program. And I think, and that's it. So there's a bunch of resources here, and these are all clickable links. So when I send out the presentation, you can check those out. And some energy tips that you can review when I send this out as well, and our contact information. So Does anyone have any generic questions? If not, then I can stop the recording and we can ask more personal questions if you have questions about your housing situation. And feel free to either unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions come in, so I'm going to stop the recording.